Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Tyler McNabb, and this is my 400EX. So in today's video, we're gonna be messing with the old 400EX. So the last couple videos that I've been doing have mainly been with my buddy's 400. So figured I'd come back to this thing because this thing needs some love too. So today, we're going to be doing an upgrade to the rear brake system. So currently, I've just got a stock brake system, 400EX rear caliper. Everything back here is 400EX. One reason I'm doing this is so for basically what I've been wanting for a long time is a rotor guard. And Hess Motorsports used to make like a big billet rotor guard for these things that came down below the rotor and basically protected your rotor. Well, they don't make them anymore, and I haven't been able to find one that anybody else makes, so that kind of sucked. And plus, I've bent 2 rotors in like the last year, and so I'm kind of sick of buying rotors. And so the only other option would either be like a skid plate or a rotor guard that's like a skid plate. But I'm not a fan of skid plates, especially for XC racing. So I would much rather run a sprocket guard and then some sort of rotor guard. But like I said, no one's making those for the 400. So instead, I am going to be upgrading to a 450R system. And so what I've got here is Hess Motorsports. They still make their rotor guard for the Honda 450R. And so what you can do is I ordered this billet 450R rotor guard, and then I've got a 450R rear caliper, a 450R rotor, pads, rebuild kit for the caliper, and then the brake rotor hub. And so if you get those parts, you can swap them out and put it on a 400EX rear end, and then you have a 450R system. And so the benefits to this are not only you get a better rear caliper, it's a lot bigger than the 400EX caliper, but you also, the rotor on this thing is like almost an inch smaller in diameter. And so you're gonna gain quite a bit of ground clearance just by running this over a 400EX rotor. So that's another big thing. I wanted to do the upgrade. I figured, might as well. Plus I'll be able to have this rotor guard, which will keep me from bending rotors. So yeah, figured I'd go through and document this process today. And one of the first things I'm probably going to do is I bought this caliper used. It's totally disassembled now. I took the piston and everything out, and what I'm probably going to do is this thing is in need of some love, so figured I would go through, sandblast it, throw a thing of powder coat on it, probably some nice matte black, and then that guy will be ready to go, and then we can probably start get ready for the install. So yeah, I'm going to do that, and then in a separate video, I'm going to go over, I went ahead, I figured I'm doing brakes, I might as well do the fronts as well. So I've got YFZ 450 calipers on mine, and so I got new pads, got a couple rebuild kits for the calipers. They've needed rebuilt for a while, and there's the rebuild kit for the rear caliper, pads for the rear caliper, and then that's just some various hardware from Honda. And then I've got some Maxima brake fluid, .4, and we should be good to go. So let's jump right into it, do some time lapse of me getting this thing sandblasted and powder coated, and then we can jump in to installing the rest of the setup. Let's do it. Okay guys, so got the old caliper powder coated, and This thing turned out pretty sweet. I love the look of this matte black. It's such a good finish. It's not too shiny, just looks great. But got that coated, looks pretty good. Also coated the parking brake block off. It looks pretty good as well. Then I went ahead, took a wire wheel to this. It still looks dirty, but it's a lot cleaner than it was when I took it out. So took a wire wheel to that. Got that a little bit cleaned up. That's the piston for the caliper. So next thing to do is going to be go ahead and probably rebuild the caliper. So I've never rebuilt a caliper before, but it's pretty simple. There's 2 O-rings that go in those grooves. Slide those in, and then slide the piston back in, and then it'll pretty much be ready to go back together. So I'm going to do that real quick. I'm not going to go into detail on how to do it. I'm going to do a video later when I rebuild the front calipers with the put new pads and everything on those. But just go through real quick, rebuild this caliper, and then we will be ready to start taking the rear end apart and put this beautiful Hess Motorsports billet aluminum rotor guard on. This thing is sweet, and it's really light since it's aluminum. Got the rotor, got the hub, and yeah, we should be about ready to go. So I'm going to rebuild this caliper real quick, and then we'll get to taking the rear end apart. Well, got her all rebuilt and put back together, and I'd say it's looking pretty good. Powder coat really brought it together, I believe. But yeah, overall it actually wasn't too hard to rebuild the caliper. It's a little tough getting the O-rings in and then pushing the piston back in, but other than that, it actually really wasn't that bad. It'll be fun with those YFZ calipers because those are actually dual piston, so that'll be kind of fun trying to get those out. But other than that, yeah, it went over pretty smooth, and seemed to come back together pretty easy. I rebuilt it, and then I went through, and these sliders, I cleaned those off with a wire wheel and then greased the heck out of them just to make sure they're good and good to go. So pretty much all that's left to do now is I've got the new copper washers for the banjo bolt that'll go in there, and then this thing's ready to go on. So pretty much from here, we're going to be ready to go ahead and start tearing this rear end apart so we can go ahead and get the 450R set up on the rear of this. So I'd say let's start getting it apart. Okay, so we got the rear end disassembled. Having a little trouble there at the end. I forgot that this guy has like an O-ring on the inside of it, and so that O-ring was getting caught in this groove, and so I was like, I could not figure out why that brake stay wasn't coming off, but turns out that was why. So got that off, and now I think we're pretty much ready to put it back together. I'll probably go ahead and put it back together, and then I'll take this caliper off and put the other one on. We'll just see how it plays out, but yeah, so because then putting it back together, that's the easy part, and then the fun part comes with bleeding these brakes. But I've got a trick that I use with front brakes. I've never bled a rear caliper before, so we'll see how my trick with the front caliper or with the rear caliper works, because it works really well with the front calipers, but I'll have to try it here. We'll get to that once I get this all back together. So I'm gonna slap this back together real quick, and then we should be good to go. So let's do it. Okay, so got this whole rear end back together, got the tire back on, got this thing sitting on the ground, and this setup is looking pretty darn good. So we got that beautiful billet rotor guard, the brand new rotor, and then of course the new caliper. So went ahead, got the old 400 caliper off, and drained most of the fluid. So now comes the fun part of actually bleeding the brakes. So how I've done this in the past, and this is, I've only done front brakes before, but I assume it'll work the same way with the rear brakes, is what I'm gonna do is I've got this clear tubing. You can get some of it at your local hardware store. Let's see, this stuff is 1/4 inch ID. So just some 1/4 inch ID vinyl tubing. I stick it on the bleeder there, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up to the brake pedal up there, push it for a little bit, and then I'm gonna hold the brake pedal down, and then I'm gonna crack while I'm holding the brake pedal down, so putting pressure in the line, I'm gonna crack that bleeder, let the air come out, and then close the bleeder and then pump it some more, and just continuously do that until you start to get fluid out of here, because eventually that fluid will move down the line and then it'll come up through here, and then you'll be able to see once you start getting fluid up here, and then also you'll be able to see all the air bubbles come out. So once you're getting constant fluid out of this and no more air bubbles, then you know you're good to go. And this is just a good way to do it, get you like 3 feet of tubing. And so I've got it on there, and then it'll slowly fill up. And then the reason for this too is that way the air can't get back in. So the fluid's gonna come up, but it's just gonna sit on that bleeder. So if for some reason you would like let off the brake pedal or something, and if you just had that open, it would suck air in, but with this, it'll just suck fluid back in. So that's how I've done it with front brakes. So we're gonna try it. It's a nice, fairly tedious process, so just be patient while you're doing it, and let's see if we can get this guy bled. Well guys, after about 20 minutes of trying to bleed this thing, I was finally able to get it bled. The method that I used worked pretty well. Yeah, it just takes some time. It's a tedious process, you know, pumping the brake and then opening the bleeder, pumping the brake, opening the bleeder. It takes a while, but it works. So overall, I'm pretty pleased. Hopefully I'll go out and test it later this week. Make sure it's bled good and it's stopping. It'll lock up the rear tires when I push it, so it should be good, but I'll go out and test it at some point. But anyway, overall, I am pretty pleased with this setup. I held up the old rotor next to this, and the old rotor, if mounted on the axle, would be the same distance down as the bottom of this. So as you can see, you probably gain close to maybe an inch or so, or yeah, an inch or so in radius off the bottom of this. So overall, it definitely improves your ground clearance, even if you just get the rotor, but then the rotor guard, you know, that's gonna protect your rotor, so that helps out a lot. Okay, so yeah, say that's pretty much gonna wrap it up for this video. Overall, I think I'm going to be pretty happy with this setup. Hopefully I won't bend any more rotors. Like I said, I think I think that was my third one that I was on this quad in the course of probably a little over a year. I think I've owned it for about a year and a half, so probably about that. So anyway, hopefully this setup will prove to be well. Gives me a little more ground clearance and protects the rotors. So hope you guys are enjoying the content. Figured I'd get back on it with this quad. So hopefully we'll be doing some racing here in the next couple weeks. I'd really like to get back to it anyway. Work's been pretty hectic and stuff. So overall, yeah, definitely want to get back to that soon. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.